The Cubs' Cinderella playoff hopes seem to be dwindling game after game. The Cubs drop one to the Pirates, 5-0. Paul Skenes shutout outing for the Pirates. But we're not going to talk too much about that game. We're going to talk about what this roster could look like in the future. Could 2025 bring more than 2024? That and more on this edition of the Cubs Baseball Channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section. Let us know what you guys think, who you'd like to see on the team in 2025. But for now, here's your invitation to our show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball Channel. My name's Anthony Pasquale. He is Mick Gillespie. You can find him on Twitter at Broadcaster Mick. You can find me at ant_Pasquale3. A little bit unorthodox today. Mick is in the studio. I'm in the Tennessee Smokies booth, but we've got a Cubs game to talk about. And unfortunately for Chicago, after blowing that game a few nights ago, yesterday was not that pretty. Cubs are shut out by the Pirates, 5-0. Paul Skenes in his fourth start against the Cubs this season was excellent, and the Pirates have won 2 in a row against our Cubbies.
I mean, they just didn't get the big hit when they had men on base. So they just kept stranding bases loaded early. You know, could have gotten some runs across. Skenes is good, but you got to get hits in those situations. And then Kyle Hendricks, you know, out there kind of just like holding things together, and then, you know, that slipped away. And Tyson Miller, for one of the few times this year, lit up, and there you go. You know, your 3-run homer after a couple runs early, and a loss that you can't afford to have. You know, and I mean, it just puts the Cubs in a spot where they weren't going to make the playoffs anyway. But there's just unless they win every game, they're not, and they're not going to. They're out of it. It's time to start looking ahead to next year.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, 5 innings and 2 runs from Hendricks is okay. That's what you would hope to get from him. But if your offense isn't going to put up anything, Hendricks is going to get tagged with yet another loss. And then, like you mentioned, a rare blow-up from Tyson Miller. He allowed the 3-run homer to Triolo, I believe, was who took him deep. And all of a sudden, the Cubs are down 5-0 in a game where they can't get much going, and they end up taking a loss. But we're not going to dwell on this one too much. The Cubs dropped to 4.5 games back in the wild card race as the Braves won yesterday as well. Chris Sale kind of cementing a Cy Young in his first season in Atlanta. It's been super impressive to watch him. But as we shift gears a little bit to 2025, let's talk about it. Some guys that might be in, some guys that might be out. And we can start with yesterday's starter, Kyle Hendricks.
Yeah, I think this is it for Hendricks, and I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't retire, just because, I mean, it's kind of right at the end of his career. I mean, there's been times this season where he's looked like Kyle Hendricks, but the room for error has gotten so small. We remember what a great pitcher he was, and he's still a great competitor, even though he's far from what he was a few years ago. But I doubt that. I just don't see a scenario where the Cubs bring him back. I think that this is it. But he's been such a great guy and a wonderful teammate and a champion that you want him to go out on his terms. Contract's up at the end of the year anyway. So I'm guessing that – I don't even think I'm guessing. I mean, when he finishes this season, that'll be it.
Yeah, I think
at least for the Cubs.
Yeah, I think you could definitely pencil him in as a guy that maybe won't be around next year, especially with so many starters that the Cubs currently do have. The next guy I want to bring up is a guy that you've been talking about who probably doesn't fit on this roster long-term anyway, is Patrick Wisdom. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you have room for Patrick Wisdom now, let alone next year. I mean, I see they've been playing him at first base a little bit. But to me, he's another guy who is just really not going to fit in on this roster. I mean, if you got the players in the farm system that you're trying to push to the big leagues, that's definitely a spot that needs to be taken by a young player. And every at-bat that these guys aren't getting right now on the big league roster is less experience that they're going to have next year when you hope to contend. And so, I guess like, you feel like you have a chance when your percentage is like 7% to make the playoffs. I think they've been out of this for a long time. It's been fun to watch, don't get me wrong, but they're making a mistake not having guys in that particular role, even if they're not getting at bats every day, in my opinion. I think just being around the team, seeing the pitching, learning the things that you got to learn from being in the big leagues. So I don't see a scenario where he's back.
Yeah, and then kind of the granddaddy of them all was the big acquisition last year. Cody Bellinger re-signed 3 years. A guy that signed for 3 years, $80 million with a few opt-outs. Cody Bellinger was kind of supposed to be that star in the Cubs lineup, but hasn't truly lived up to that star name this season. The Cubs have an influx of outfielders. Crow-Armstrong took center field from him. You move Bellinger to right and Seiya Suzuki becomes your full-time DH. But he's a guy that could opt out, but does he think he's going to make more than $30 million somewhere else this offseason? Is he even going to stick with Boris for another year? A ton of questions with Cody Bellinger.
Well, remember at the beginning of the season, and I'm saying, look, Crow-Armstrong's your center fielder of the future. And now he is. He's there. Is he Cody Bellinger yet? No. I mean, we've seen flashes of great. We've seen him struggle. But defensively, he's head and shoulders better than Bellinger, and that's why he's in center field every night. The next one's going to be Owen Casey, who's going to be your right fielder. And he's going to be better than Seiya Suzuki defensively. And then when he figures it out, he's going to hit. I think he's going to struggle a little bit with the off-speed stuff, the slow stuff, but I think he'll figure it out. And then you'll have him in right field. And the sooner that transition happens, to me, the better this team's going to be long-term. The problem is the same problem that we're talking about right now, is if I'm Cody Bellinger, I'm opting in. I mean, I'm going to get $30 million. I don't think anybody else is going to pay him $30 million. That's MVP money, and he's not an MVP anymore. I mean, he had a great season last year. He's a good player. He's better than average, but he's not great. He's not an MVP player. At least he hasn't been this year. So his best move is going to be to opt in, I would think. Now, we were surprised when Marcus Stroman opted out last year, but I got a feeling that for him, the best business move is going to be to opt in. And then I just don't know what you do with him, because he opts in. Where's he going to play? Everybody's signed in the outfield. And then your best outfielder defensively is Crow-Armstrong. And who knows, maybe he comes back and he's like a much better hitter next year. And Bellinger goes this way and PCA goes this way. Then what are you going to do? So, and he's not playing first because Michael Busch has been pretty good over there. So I'm thinking that he opts back in. I'd say percentage wise, I'd probably say 65 to 70% in, 30% out, but anything can happen.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is with Bellinger, if he does opt in, obviously that makes your team better, but it also hamstrings you into where can you put your prospects? Where can you put Alcantara? Where are you going to put Seiya Suzuki? And where are you going to make room for a star that we all know the Cubs need? Now, I know some people want it to be Pete Alonso as the DH. Okay, let's say you do go get Pete Alonso and Cody Bellinger's in right. What happens to Seiya Suzuki? Or let's say they make the splash and they get Juan Soto, which would be like the granddaddy of them all. You put Juan Soto in right field, obviously, then Seiya Suzuki becomes your DH. Maybe Bellinger goes to first, Busch goes to second, and then Nico Hoerner's the odd guy out. And you still don't have anywhere to put your prospects. So there's going to need to be some crafty roster moves to make this work in a way where the guys that you're paying can still play, but you also still have room for your guys that you want to see if they can play. And right now, I don't envy Jed Hoyer or whoever it is that ends up making that decision.
In a way, it feels like this roster is a mess because they have so many players signed.
Which is usually not a bad thing.
Right. But I mean, it's not a bad thing if you're a first place team.
Yeah.
If you're a third place team, a 500 team, and you got all these guys signed, then you don't have any place to move. And where the strength of the organization is supposed to be is that all these young players that are coming up through the system, this number one, number two system that they've had, well, there's nowhere to put them. Like the Orioles have a team like this, but they had spots for all their guys to come. And then if they didn't, some guys didn't have contracts, other guys ended up getting traded. Maybe that's what the Cubs do. But it's not like you have everyone signed and you look around and go, hey, guess what, man? We've got a whole team. We have a first place team, and we're trying to keep them intact. They're trying to keep a team intact that spent most of the season under 500, with the strength of the organization supposedly being the young players. So at least the position players, I think that too many of these guys are signed. Dansby and Happ and Seiya Suzuki, and if Cody Bellinger opts in, and Paredes, and I mean, there's just nowhere to move except catcher. And honestly, like, at least lately, we've actually gotten some good play out of the catchers. I'm guessing Bethancourt probably won't be back. I'm guessing they go out and spend some money and get like a star catcher, maybe, because that's a spot that they could do that. There's lots of room on the pitching side of things, and I got a feeling that that's where they're going to try to make their big splash, and maybe bringing Corbin Burns in just to have. And I guess the other part of this too is, if I'm Craig Counsell, I got to get some more of my people in this, where my structure, the way that we did things in the past, is able to translate over to the Cubs. I'm sure he's probably thinking that too, but position player wise, I don't, unless they start trading people off the big league roster, which is a possibility, there's just nowhere to put anybody.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it, because it was such a stunning move to acquire Counsell. He didn't get to bring much of his staff. They're all still in Milwaukee, and that's probably why Milwaukee's winning and the Cubs aren't. But you mentioned it, like, the easy answer is probably go get a stud pitcher and lean into the way the offense played in April and August instead of May, June, and July. And we're probably going to be talking the same time next year about how the Cubs are going to come up short. They need to make some moves. The only problem is all the moves available are tough. Do you have to trade Nico Hoerner? Do you have to cut ties with either Suzuki or Happ? And if you do, what if Alcantara isn't who you expect them to be, or Shaw and Triantos aren't who you want them to be, or if Michael Busch's rookie season was a flash in the pan? Like, there's a lot of ifs and buts and whats, and it's going to be hard to figure out how this team is going to look in 2025. But I think you and I both know missing the playoffs by a few games again is unacceptable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to have a game plan, I mean, I think that's a big part of everything that you do with an organization, not just as a team president, but just as a business owner. What are the goals that you're putting out in front of you to get to what you're trying to get to? And the Cubs have had some bad luck. They've had some injuries. The team hasn't stayed healthy, but even when the team's been healthy, they've had too many games like last night. And I don't know how many times I've said this on here, but you can't go 1 out of 5 games not scoring a damn run. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is your Major League Baseball team, and it seems like every time you turn around, these guys they get shut out. I mean, it's one thing to lose. It's another thing when you can't score a run. And I feel like it happens all the time. 1 out of every 5. They have a good streak going, and baseball can be that way. But you know what? Figure out a way to get some runs across with the bases loaded in the first, the bases loaded in the second, 8 men on base left through 3 or 4 innings. That's what the problem with the team has been. When you just need that guy that's just going to slap, like Ben Zobrist type, just slap it somewhere through the hole and get things going. I always judge players based on, when they're coming up through the minor leagues, how they look against the best, right? So if you got a pitcher, how do they look against the best hitting team in the league? And if you have position players, what do they look like against the best pitchers in the league? And I think that translates to the big leagues too. How does your team attack the best, and what do they do against the best? Or what do they, that's where the Cubs have been really, really bad this year. The best pitchers have just shoved it right down their throat. And that's what worries me about this roster, bringing the whole roster back. I mean, you'd love to just keep some of these guys and move some of these guys out, but then you got to be smart with who you keep and who you don't keep. I mean, I watch Schwarber hit home runs every day, and I'm going, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have him?
Yeah, and that's a guy the Cubs obviously had in their system for quite some time, and that would be the missing piece, the power that you need in this lineup. But it'll be interesting for Jed Hoyer and company to figure out before opening day 2025. I'm sure some changes will and have to be made. But as it stands right now, the percentages are dwindling. Just a 3.1% chance to make the playoffs and a 0.1% chance to win that division. Cubs play the Pirates today at Wrigley Field, another night game, 6:40 p.m. Central. It'll be Shota Imanaga once again against the Pirates. He's 11-3 with a 3.14 ERA on the season. Firmly in the Rookie of the Year race, but probably going to lose to yesterday's starting pitcher, Paul Skenes, and the Pirates have not yet announced their starter. Mick, can the Cubs squander a game out of this series? Does it even matter?
Look, you want to keep winning, man. I mean, I know that they're not going to make the playoffs. I mean, you can go ahead and bank that they're not, but it's still fun when you go out there and win games. Give us something good to talk about.
Sure.
I love it when we see these guys come up from the minor leagues. They're waiting way too long on bringing some of these guys up and getting them experience. I mean, I miss the old days when the September call-ups would happen, and then you just turn around and be like a roster of young players.
Yeah.
That's not how it is anymore. I mean, that's the way that baseball wants it. But these games are important as far as experience goes for young players. I mean, look how long it took Pete Crow-Armstrong to kind of get to where he is right now. He's actually become a pretty solid player over the last month or so. But it's a process, and the levels, the minor leagues are so watered down now that you got to get to the big leagues to fail for some of these guys. So the opportunity to do that is now until the end of the month, because I mean, I just wonder, like, what, like, do you think they really think they're going to make the playoffs? Like, do you think when it was like 7% that they're going, hey, we're going to do this?
It's just the attitude in the clubhouse after winning 6 in a row versus losing 2. It's so different. Like, you go out there believing you can win every game, and now you definitely feel some level of defeat. But we'll see. Crazier things have happened. The Cubs had a similar type of lead on the Marlins and the Diamondbacks last year, and they ended up not making the playoffs. So maybe they can be on the other end of things this September. But for now, guys, thanks so much for joining us on the Cubs Baseball channel. Always appreciate chopping it up about the Cubs. And next year, as we're Cubs fans, so we're used to saying there's always next year. But here's to hoping that it will be better than this year and last year, and to hoping that maybe the end of this season could be special. But for Mick, I'm Anthony. Thank you guys for joining us on the Cubs Baseball channel. Keep liking and subscribing, following us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.